Welcome to the NitWits, a weekly roundtable discussion on the Penn State Nittany Lions, now in its 27th season. Our panel features a longtime Penn State media and NitWits tag team, Neil Rudell of the Altoona Mirror and Mark Brennan of Lions 24/7 with Fight on State. The NitWits are hosted by WTAJ's Ryan Riskey, and each week we welcome a former Nittany Lion as our special guest analyst. The NitWits are brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By DeLeo Games, serving the community since 1945. By Reed and Solaney Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington. By McAlear's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing, heating, and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. By RE/MAX Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service. By Dorman's Jewelry, the answer is always Dorman's. By Brent Kogan Electrical Services, lighting the way for you. By NovaCare, Altoona and State College, the power of physical therapy. By Blair Candy Company, the one-stop shop for all your tailgating needs. Candy, snacks, paper supplies, and more. By Harry's Construction, if you can dream it, we can create it. By Lions 24/7 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday.
Penn State and UCLA clash for the first time in 60 years, and it ends with the Nittany Lions coming away with a 27-11 win. We break down the way the defense continues to shut down opponents in the second half, while looking at how Tyler Warren compares to other Penn State tight ends. Nittany Nation Overtime is next.
The money is talking, I'm flowing, it's coming in just how I do it. Yeah, you know what it is. Hey, we doing it big. Look up, there is no limit, no, we cannot settle for this. Yeah, can't stop, nah, won't stop. Yeah, spin on live, you don't believe it, just watch.
Welcome into another edition of Nittany Nation Overtime. I'm Ryan Riskey, joined by the Nitwits, Mark Brennan, Neil Rudell, and former Nittany Lion Bill Conson. Guys, as we've seen a lot this year, Penn State's defense just comes out in the second half and just dominates the opponent.
Yeah, it's amazing. They haven't allowed a point in the third quarter all year, the adjustments. They've started slow, continue on both sides of the ball, but boy, when they come out at halftime, their defense has been tremendous. They've only allowed 17 points in the second half all year. James pointed out yesterday the last touchdown was against their reserve. So definitely something to build around, and with all the teams that have gotten upset yesterday, Penn State is staying the course.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. You're there at 5-0 overall and 2-0 in the Big Ten. And when you, again, as Neil said, when you look at what happened in college football yesterday, any win is really a good win. Could they have been a little smoother in different areas? Absolutely. I was a little surprised that not having Singleton impacted them as much as it did against this defense. But end of the day, you never thought they were in any serious trouble, and they did what they needed to do. They banked another win.
Yeah, the defense continues to impress, particularly in the second half. It seems like they're more aggressive in the second half. There's more blitzes. The first half may have been a bit of a feeling out process. Let's identify what we can take advantage of, and let's really get after the quarterback. And it's paid dividends so far. Let's hope it continues.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's also one of those things where, as you said, the first half they might just be feeling some things out, except the second half defense, to me, has felt like it looks a lot more like Manny Diaz was calling the plays last year. Obviously, he's now the head coach at Duke, except that it feels different going from the first to the second.
Yeah, I mean, what I like is the fact that you have Tom Allen up in the box, and he's clearly making positive adjustments. You know, there have been times when we've watched this Penn State team a few years ago when somebody would be beating them in a certain way and they never quite adjusted and fixed it. Now we've seen in multiple games where a team has done well relatively early offensively. They push the right buttons, and all of a sudden, they're playing shutdown football in the second half when it matters most. The one thing I was a little nervous about, though, is when Kobe King wasn't out there for a lot of the second half. I don't know if he was bumped up or not. They didn't seem to be quite, where they were with him at that middle linebacker spot. And remember, he's got that microphone in his ear now. He's the one communicating everything. So good snaps for Tyler Elsdon, but I think they have to tighten it up a little bit when he's in there.
And yet they forced 3 punts right away in the second half and had a turnover on downs. But I agree. I think the depth that they've developed on defense, I mean, I guess you could, do they have a great player yet? Maybe that will be Carter. Maybe it's Dennis Sutton. But
could be Zane Durant.
It could be. I think they have a lot. They come at you in waves, particularly the pass rush, and I think that's what really rattled a young quarterback who did a pretty good job for UCLA.
And one thing to factor in there too is, with the freshman quarterback, they only allowed one big play, and it was just that wheel route to the running back, and then the defense was able to hold them to the field goal. Except one thing I wanted to point out is, as you said, there's a lot of depth here. They might not have that superstar player that has emerged. It could be Denai, it could be Abdul Carter, except that means there's just a lot more players for a defense to game plan. You can't just try to shut down Abdul Carter and think you're going to be able to run the ball or pass at will, because they have so many other guys that'll be coming at you.
Did you ever play defense and then they moved you to tackle?
They did, one spring, actually. And then, I had the benefit of knowing all of our offense pretty well anyway. So I knew exactly when the line were making calls and I was on a defense listening to them, I could adjust accordingly. I had a standout spring, quite frankly, because I remembered most of it. We're 5 games in. We're 5-0. It seems like the defense is playing their best in the second half. Those are all positive things. I'd like to see them force a few more turnovers.
Yeah.
To your point, UCLA came in here on noon start. It was not, we didn't do any favors with that, with a backup quarterback. All signs pointed to a pretty easy win. Our sluggish start on offense for the third or fourth consecutive week has made games interesting, but for the most part, it was a win that you can build on and sets the table for the rest of the season.
I would say the one thing defensively, and I touched on it earlier, is the depth at linebacker. I know they're playing a lot of that Lion package, the 4-2-5, but sooner or later in the Big Ten, you are going to have to rely on your depth at linebacker. And the big play you mentioned, Tamir Robinson, young linebacker, got out of place. Now, that's not great for that game, but that's a great learning moment for that kid in a game that they weren't going to lose. And I think the snaps that he was able to get, Dakari Nelson getting out there and getting snaps, I think all of those things were really good, even though late in that fourth quarter, when UCLA was moving the ball, you don't necessarily want to see them go down and score if you're Penn State, but I think it was really valuable to get those young linebacker snaps, because again, sooner or later in the Big Ten, somebody's going to run the ball against you, or one of your linebackers is going to get banged up, and you're going to need those backups.
Yeah, the freshman Lane did a nice job to chase that kid down hard and force a field goal early.
I was just going to say, even the second stringers did not make it easy on that first team offense for UCLA.
Yeah, and James called timeout twice. I mean, he put them in a challenging situation late in the game to try to keep them out of the end zone. So, they're all getting real live experience in kind of key situations.
Yep, and obviously the defense once again showing up, putting out a great performance. So the offense also looked good again this week. We're going to break that down when Nittany Nation Overtime returns.
The NitWits are being brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By DeLeo Games, serving the community since 1945. By McAleer's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing, heating, and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. And by Reed and Solaney Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Welcome back into Nittany Nation Overtime. Ryan Riskey joined by Mark Brennan, Neil Rudell, and former Nittany Lion Bill Conson. Guys, we just got done talking about the defense, but offensively, Penn State might have had another wide receiver emerge. Liam Clifford had over 100 yards.
And that was cool to see. I mean, he's been in his brother's shadow. He catches 3 balls for 107 yards at clutch times in the game. I mean, Aller really has chemistry with him over the middle. Those are a couple of the key plays in the game.
Yeah, I think that gives opposing defenses just one other thing to kind of game plan for. It was kind of a bummer to see Julian Fleming, after everything he's gone through, make kind of a key catch there and just come this close to getting into the end zone. I think everybody kind of would have liked to see him score. The passing game, I think this was another instance. They averaged almost 10 yards per attempt, that if they would have just passed and passed and passed, I think they would have scored more points. But I think it's smart that they continue to try to develop the run, give your offensive line confidence, Bill, and that's something that you could understand. Even when you're not having a great rushing game, they're still committed to the run. And that offensive line, even though it didn't play necessarily as well as it did against Illinois, I think they have a lot of confidence moving forward.
Well, they're from a passing game standpoint, part of the success, I think, is a clean pocket.
Yeah.
Aller is not getting hit a lot, but you're right. The confidence you build over time in opening holes and working as a cohesive unit is a plus. That's going to be a factor down the road. But the offense was sluggish. I mean, 28 total yards in the first quarter. We waited until 6 minutes and 40 seconds left in the second quarter to put points on the board. Kotelnicki, and I get that there's a bond there, but I think he should take a risk every now and then earlier on in the game. He reminds me of like an ice cream vendor, a guy selling ice cream, where I'll just keep serving plain vanilla, and then until the customer stops asking for it, I'll then put some sprinkles on top of it. But until then, I think give us a little flavor a little earlier on, get these guys upfield, take some more risks downfield, and we might see some points early on in the game. That said, it was a successful offense, and we scored 27 yesterday against UCLA.
Well, I don't know, Bill. I mean, you had 3 different guys take snaps in the first series, I think. So that's a bit of a banana split from Kotelnicki, right?
You can't argue the creativity. I mean, you got a 350-pound guy running in motion.
Right.
You got 7 offensive linemen in some of these formations, so I can't fault that effort. But I think to Mark's point, running the ball, establishing the run sets precedent and gives yourself some viable options later on in the game.
You had a big drop early in the first series with Fleming, and that derailed your time of possession.
They have pretty
early.
detailed stats now, and one that jumped out at me, Drew Aller was 4 of 5 on passes that went 15 yards or more in the air for over 100 yards. And are they vanilla? Or are they trying to keep some things in their back pocket for when you're in a game and you're going to need those plays? And I wonder if that's not part of it with Kotelnicki, because, as I said, I mean, Aller was clearly able to do what he needed to do in that game, and I think he could have had another monster game against that defense. But I don't mind them trying to stay balanced. The best Penn State teams have been balanced teams, and I think they're doing a good job forcing that.
And Mark, going off of that stat about 15 or more yards through the air, there were games last year they probably didn't even attempt that many, let alone they're completing them, some of which were on big third downs.
Yeah, and you look at Katron Allen, I mean, his longest run was 11 yards. But, man, after contact,
it's unreal.
You better have your lunch packed if you're going to tackle this guy. And I do think with Singleton not there, that affected maybe their explosion. And the freshman Martin, I thought, looked pretty quick. He caught 3 passes.
Yeah, well, he was a great pass catcher in high school, and that's a unique skill for a young running back to have. Would like to see him get more involved in the running game if Singleton's out. I would imagine Singleton will be back for the next game.
You'd like to just hope that this is just a precautionary measure you got at USC next week. You shouldn't have needed him to win the game if it came down to it.
Well, he dressed and warmed up, and Franklin said afterward on one of Neil's questions that that they intended for him to play, but it was a last-second scratch, and I think that was probably being better safe than sorry.
And they did struggle to run the only 85 rushing yards. Katron was under 4 yards a carry, except they made plays when they needed to, and they didn't have to maybe show, as you said, they haven't had to show too much yet for when they might need these big plays down the road.
Bill, what did you see, and how does it affect players with the 9 a.m. start? Because I thought UCLA played pretty hard throughout the game, and how do you think that affected?
I think it had some effect. I don't know their travel if they flew in on Friday.
Friday.
They
They got
obviously
there
got
like
here Thursday night or Friday.
No, they
but I
came
think
Friday.
your body has to wake up a bit. You're essentially asking kids that were born in, for the most part, born and raised on the West Coast to play a 9 o'clock start. You would have thought the team that was sluggish out of the gate would have been UCLA, and here they converted a couple fourth downs and moved the ball a bit with a backup quarterback. There is a factor. I don't know how often schedulers are going to ask West Coast teams to come east and play noon kickoffs like that. I hope not many.
Right now, all of the West teams are 0-3 when they've traveled to the West Coast in Big Ten play. West Coast to the East Coast, yep. So, anyways, one other thing we do want to talk about offensively will be Tyler Warren. However, we got to take a quick break. We're going to compare how he stacks up against some other great Penn State tight ends. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
The Nitwits are being brought to you by RE/MAX Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service. By Dorman's Jewelry, the answer is always Dorman's. By Blair Candy Company, the one-stop shop for all your tailgating needs. Candy, snacks, paper supplies, and more. And by Harry's Construction. If you can dream it, we can create it.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Welcome back into Nittany Nation Overtime. Ryan Riskey, Mark Brennan, Neil Rodell, and Bill Conson. Guys, Tyler Warren scored another touchdown. He's got 4 in their 5 games this year, and he just continues to prove he's one of the best in the country.
They're using him in a lot of different ways. I like the little shovel pass that they also, they line him up in different places. This is a bit of a early postseason push for honors. That would benefit the program. And he seems to be handling all that well.
Yeah, he broke the record for total touchdowns by a tight end. Mike Gesicki held it at 17 now. Fryermuth, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm saying Gesicki. But, one thing about this kid Warren is he was a high school quarterback. And, he comes in and they're able to form him into what they want a tight end to be. A lot of the tight ends in high school are just kind of glorified receivers. And I think it was so good. You have the coaching staff, Ty Howell now, being able to work with these guys and develop them into well-rounded tight ends. So as much as we're seeing of this guy catching, running, passing, he's a great blocker too. I mean, he does it all, and it's going to make him a very high draft pick, and they're lucky to have him.
Yeah, big physical kid at the position, 6'6", 260. Back in the day, that was a Kyle Brady-sized guy. And, this is a school that has had their fair share, especially recently, of quality tight ends that have gone on to the NFL. So, could you arguably say that Penn State's becoming tight end U like we were linebacker U? I don't know. But, I mean, hey, kudos to James Franklin for maximizing the skill set of his personnel and putting these guys in formations that defenses aren't prepared to handle. So,
and we've seen a lot of great tight ends come through Penn State. I remember there was one practice before the 2021 season. James afterwards had said he thought that was the best tight end room that they had ever at Penn State, and that included Brenton Strange, Theo Johnson, and Tyler Warren.
It's hard to argue. Hey, how about the place kicker? We should have a shout out to Ryan Barker. Came in, difficult decision to make a change. But they made it.
And you had to do it. I mean, Sander was unfortunately only 3 of 9. Barker comes in.
So this kid comes in, and he's pretty much perfect, including one from 40. They're going to need that.
I would say, though, that overall their special teams, there are some question marks there. Riley Thompson didn't have a great game.
2 weeks in a row.
Right. They had one deflected, and then they had a punt return where there were 2 penalties on a punt return. They made some changes in the return game. It's going to be interesting to see if those things stick. But they really need to, it seems like something's popping up in special teams every week, an issue every week. And when you get into these games that are close, that could really cost you.
I'm not sure. I mean, Martin took one out of the end zone. You look like initially he shouldn't do it, but he had a good return on it. And I thought Tracy, Spencer and Tracy, that's a character, right? I thought
99% of our audience has no idea what he's talking about.
Google it. But those guys caught the ball in traffic. I thought they did fine.
I didn't think they did poorly, no. I was just saying that every week one thing's popping up. 1 week they're missing field goals. 1 week they're fumbling. 1 week the punting isn't very good. And you really need all that stuff to be solid.
No doubt. we're about to go and face our stiffest test of the year in Southern Cal, traveling out to the Coliseum, and that better be one aspect of your game that you have buttoned up. We've made our mistakes. We've kind of sorted things out in the kicking game. That's absolutely critical. That is a solid facet of your game if you're going to win big games on the road.
And speaking of that trip out to USC, this next 3-game stretch probably one of the most critical that they've had in a while. At USC, at Wisconsin, home against Ohio State.
Oh, hey, the stage is set, and with a lot of other teams losing, I mean, you got a veteran quarterback now. I mean, everything is in front of Penn State, and this is the big opportunity. People have been talking about this for the narrative. Let's change the narrative by winning out there.
Well, it's going to be a challenge. I think it's a little disappointing that USC lost to Minnesota. I think if you're a Penn State fan, you want USC to win that game, even though you're playing Minnesota eventually. But I think that takes a little bit of the shine off the game. But no doubt, I mean, Ryan, your point about this stretch, there's nothing that's going to diminish that because these are 3 tough teams, 2 tough locations, and then you obviously get the Buckeyes at home.
My concern is that a 2-loss football team has its back against the wall. This could be a trap game for Penn State, and they better be well prepared to take. This is Lincoln Riley. That offense has the potential to put up points. They've lost 2 last-minute games, both to first Michigan and Minnesota on the road. So they're coming home. They know this will be a national spotlight. They certainly may have an axe to grind. So mistake-free football is going to be critical to us coming out of this with a win.
And like Michigan, USC, you can't lose another game and be considered for the playoff.
Right, and this past week really might have changed the landscape of college football with 5 of the top 11 teams losing to unranked opponents, where you kind of wonder you're going to have to start factoring in the quality of your losses, and Penn State's got a few ranked opponents coming up.
Yeah, again, an opportunity game. And, I think you make a really good point, Bill, because how many more opportunities does USC have left now? Now that they, I couldn't believe P.J. Fleck he didn't kick the field goal, but he ended up being smart, I guess.
Well, when you're in the situation he's in, why not go ahead and do it? I mean, you have the opportunity to beat them. It's almost like going for 2 when you have that opportunity against the team that most people think are better. So the fact that they were able to pull it off, good for them.
Well, big stretch coming up for Penn State. We have one thing left to do on the show. That comes every week. We'll crown our Nitwit of the Week. Did the guest finally break the streak? We'll find out next on Nittany Nation Overtime.
Don't miss a minute of Nittany Nation Overtime, now also on Apple and Spotify.
The Nitwits are being brought to you by Brent Kogan Electrical Services, lighting the way for you. By NovaCare, Altoona and State College, the power of physical therapy. By Lions 24/7 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Welcome back into Nittany Nation Overtime. And look at that, guys. The streak is over. The guest has won for the first time since 2022. Chuck Fusina broke the streak. And Bill, he's putting you on the spot now because you get to pick first.
A lot of pressure on the host this week. I say Penn State is a team on a mission. They face a pretty brutal fall or November schedule with Ohio State following, but they can't lose sight and look past this game. I say they're focused, they're hitting on all cylinders, and I say they win 27-21.
Yeah, I picked Penn State for 3 losses earlier this year, but I think they're better than I thought they were going to be, and I don't think USC is quite as good. I think this is the opportunity for them to really change the narrative on some of the ranked teams and big games. Defense and running game travel. I'm going to pick Penn State 24, USC 21.
Yeah, I thought this was going to be a loss for Penn State in the preseason, but again, I think they're playing well on both lines. I think that's going to come into play in this game. And watching that USC-Minnesota game just really makes me wonder about how tough they are on both of those lines. So I'm going to go with Penn State 24-20, eking out a win.
I had Penn State as a 2-loss team before the season started. I thought one of those losses would come in these 2 brutal road games. I'm going to go USC wins this one 27-20. I think it's going to be a close game. I just think USC's got the home field advantage. We haven't seen really the teams in the Midwest or the East Coast travel out west for these games yet, and we've seen the West Coast teams struggle when they've had to travel, so that's why I think USC is just going to pull out the win here.
Well, they're going Thursday, so hopefully that'll help. Bill, show us your book, a little plug for Bill's great book that he did on the 82 team.
I was privileged to gather a lot of great stories from teammates, coaches, fans, players. Really walks people back through our first officially recognized national championship team. So thank you to my former contributors to this thing. It's done well. It reads well. It's a great Christmas gift, and it's already early October. So no time like the present.
When the Lions Roared. You got to give the name.
When the Lions Roared. It's available on Amazon, and thank you for your support.
It's a fantastic read. I read it last year. So again, thank you so much for joining us for this week on Nittany Nation Overtime. We'll be back next Sunday to recap the game against USC.
Thanks for watching WTAJ's Nittany Nation Overtime.
The NitWits have been brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By DeLeo Games, serving the community since 1945. By Reed and Solaney Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington. By McAlear's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing, heating, and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. By Remax Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service. By Dorman's Jewelry, the answer is always Dorman's. By Brent Kogan Electrical Services, lighting the way for you. By NovaCare, Altoona and State College, the power of physical therapy. By Blair Candy Company, the one-stop shop for all your tailgating needs. Candy, snacks, paper supplies, and more. By Harry's Construction. If you can dream it, we can create it. By Lions 24/7 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.